You have just tuned into the Steel City Blitz Steelers Podcast presented by Deck Roofing Incorporated of South Florida. And we are very, very happy to be back with you. We are hoping that you are safe and sound wherever you are across the Steelers nation. A lot to get to. It's, as you all know, it is just incredibly unusual these days with the way training camp is currently running. Lack of information and a lack of eyes and seeing things that we normally be able to get our own eyes on in Latrobe and stuff. So it's just is what it is. It's the way things are, and we'll just continue to keep grinding and do the best that we can. But again, we certainly hope that you are well. And I do want to pass on one other bit of really, really good news. With the Big Ten announcing that it's not playing this fall, I will not have to endure the embarrassment of another loss to Ohio State. So
congratulations.
I know a lot of people were upset by the Big Ten canceling. I was not. I just can't stand to see Harbaugh lose again. And actually maybe it would have sped up his removal from the head coaching position. But anyway, I digress. With me as usual, Ian and Ben. And Ian, how are you this fine August evening?
Doing good. Things in Pittsburgh are pretty good.
Excellent. And Ben, how are things out in the Pacific Northwest?
Well, let me see. It's my second Friday this week. I worked Monday, then I took Tuesday off and floated down a river and drank beer all day. That was
Very nice.
Really exhausting. And then I had to go back into work today, work a day, and I'm taking the next 4 days off.
Very nice.
So, yeah, things are pretty good.
Yeah, you can't argue with 2 Fridays in 1 week. That's very impressive. Yeah. Gentlemen, I want to dive into the running backs tonight of the Pittsburgh Steelers because I think there's going to be some really interesting things happening there over the course of the next month. And I think the Steelers would open, what do they open? About 1 month exactly from, Friday? I think that's about right. So we're getting there. The course they'll open on a Monday night in New Jersey, New York. And
it's New Jersey.
It's Jersey. It's the middle there. This backfield is crowded, and you know if you look at the current roster or the current stable of running backs, we know there's James Conner, and of course Benny Snell Jr. and of course Jalen Samuels, but you also have rookie Anthony McFarland, Trey Edmonds, recently signed Wendell Smallwood, and Kareth White. Somebody that is fairly talented is probably going to get cut here. But first, Ian, go ahead and just start with your overall impressions of what you expect to see from this backfield.
So my hope is that they'll actually rotate some guys through and not, try and run Connor until the wheels come off, because he's proven that if you do that to him, he's going to get hurt sooner rather than later. I mean, his injury he suffered last year was because they were trying to get him to break his personal rushing record against the Chargers in a game that they already had won. So, he was in late in the fourth quarter in a game they easily could have plugged someone else into. So really my hope is that they try and manage everyone and use more of a sort of running back by committee approach. And they have the distribution of talent on the roster now to do that. Connor can do everything. I mean, Connor can run, Connor can catch, and Connor is arguably the best blocker of the group too.
Not arguably, he is.
Okay. Yes, he is. Well, I guess if you're including Derek Watt as a fullback in that group, Watt's probably the best blocker.
Okay, yeah, he probably is. Better blitz pickup, potentially.
Yes. Benny Snell is your, short yardage back. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Your guy you can plug in there, especially at the end of games when you're winning, who can get you those first downs and run that 4-minute offense to run out the clock. And then you've got a handful of guys who are all kind of that third down scat back Mewelde Moore type mold, right? Or maybe not even Mewelde Moore, because some of them are McFarland and Smallwood and Kareth White are all kind of the same type player. They're all, I'll call them like Darren Sproles light. That might be better than Mewelde Moore. Darren Sproles light. They're never going to be a full on, Darren Sproles type player, but they're all sort of in that mold. They're fast, they're small, they can get out and catch passes, they can run sweeps to the outside, and they can get big chunk plays for you, but you also can't depend on them to run the ball 20 times a game or even 15 times a game. They got to be used in small doses here and there. And then you have Jalen Samuels, who looked like he could kind of be that change of pace kind of guy. He's much better running out of shotgun and running to the outside than he is running out of an I formation and up the middle. He's not good, when he has to get in there between the tackles. He's much better running to the outside or even running like an inside counter play where he can bounce something back and kind of cut it against the grain.
Right.
Samuels is an okay pass catcher. He was much better last year before his injury than after he came back from his injury.
Agreed. Totally agree.
So hopefully he's recovered from that, but he could also kind of be the odd guy out here depending on how many running backs they keep. Because we've already gone through, Connor's definitely making the team. Derek Watt's definitely making the team. Benny Snell's their only short yardage back, so he's definitely making the team. They spent a draft pick this year on McFarland, so he's making the team. That's already, that's already 4 guys. So do they keep a 5th running back? And if they do, is it a guy like Smallwood or White who can return kicks where Samuels doesn't give you much on special teams? Is it a guy like Samuels who, in Tomlin terms is a been there, done that kind of guy who they know what they have with him, which in a year like this gives you some benefits? And then Trey Edmonds is Terrell Edmonds' brother, which, Tomlin also seems to have some loyalty to family members of other guys on the roster. And I mean, especially if you remember back to when they drafted Terrell Edmonds, how much he raved about like how great their family was as a football family, and their parents were great, and their, all that. So Trey Edmonds,
Trey Colbert who raved, wasn't it?
I thought they both did.
Tomlin, because didn't Edmonds come from a similar area of Virginia that Tomlin grew up in too?
Yes, I think so. With that Tidewater region,
no,
Norfolk.
The tie-in from a personal standpoint was that Colbert knew the father.
Okay,
from years ago.
Yeah, okay, who was a tight end in the NFL.
Okay.
Anyway,
at any rate,
whatever. Trey's not making the team. Trey's not making the team. So let's just move on.
Let me put it this way: Trey Edmonds is the offensive equivalent of Jordan Dangerfield. He shouldn't be on the roster, but he seems to the last 2 years because of injuries. But he's found his way onto the year-end roster. So
because of injuries, and he'll be. I agree with you. He will be on the practice squad again because he's that guy.
On the practice squad. Yeah. He'll be on the practice squad, and because they actually have larger practice squads this year. They can have 16 players instead of 10, and I think up to 6 of those guys can have unlimited NFL experience.
And they can protect, I think, 4, right?
I think, and
protect 4 every week.
Each week they designate 4 guys as protected. Yes,
and I haven't been able to find out if and it's not for lack of trying. I have not been able to find out if the guys that get protected and cannot be poached by other teams, if they get paid more. You would think if they're going to deny you the opportunity to join a roster, they've got to pay you more, right?
Ooh, boy, that's a good point.
I would think that the union would insist upon it.
Yeah. For those that don't know, if you're a practice squad player and let's say a team wants to sign you, when they do, they have to sign you to their active squad. They can't poach you. They can't poach you and just stick you on their practice squad, which means if you're going to be on the active roster, then the money's going to be different. So that's a really good point.
And you get paid a minimum of 3 weeks salary at that rate. Even if they cut you, they owe you that money for 3 weeks.
Right. Well, so Ben, your thoughts on the running back situation, just your overall thoughts, and then whether or not you see a guy that's the odd man out, and whether or not any of these guys have any sort of trade value, because I saw it being discussed on social media today.
I think that going into this season without camp, or this abbreviated sort of semi-camp thing we got going this year. It's all going to be known quantities, all of them. I mean, Tomlin right away out of the gate said, yeah, Tyson Alualu is going to be my nose tackle. Mm-hmm. And the same thing is going to apply at running back since, that bears in this conversation. I see it being the depth chart being what it was at the beginning of last year. And, I think it'll be James Conner who comes in as the number one. And given Tomlin's track record, he will run his wheels off because that's what Tomlin does with running backs. It's just what he does.
Yep.
And I see Samuels being the number two back because he's more dynamic than a Benny Snell, who is strictly a between the tackles runner. He's not a very good blocker. He's not a very good receiver. I see Snell making the roster, and then I see McFarland making the roster because he is that home run hitter. He really is the guy that I think can be a feature back in the future. I don't necessarily see him in there as a 3-down player unless his receiving ability improves and his blitz pickup's got to improve based upon his tape. But, those are things they can develop, and maybe next year he can be that guy. This year he's a developmental player, but I see him keeping 4 running backs. It seems like every year they lose 1 or 2 or 3 to injury, and a guy like Trey Edmonds ends up on the damn roster. So having 4 won't hurt him at all. They've talked about using Derek Watt as both fullback, H-back, potentially tight end. But I don't know how you're going to do that. You got tight ends already now where, I would think they're going to run a lot of either 22 or 12.
Well, in that vein, let me ask you, Ben, though, let me ask you this. Who would you rather have blocking? Would you rather have him or Zach Gentry?
Well, unless Gentry's come a long way in his blocking, I'd rather have Watt.
Right. So I'm just looking at it from that aspect of your 3 tight ends, because then if they view Watt as that, I guess they can use him in that style once in a while. But I don't know. Just throwing it out.
It's hard to. I don't know what they're going to do exactly. That's kind of my take on it. I don't see them necessarily keeping 6 wide receivers this year because they've got those 2 good receiving tight ends.
Yep.
They've got Samuels, who's a good receiving back. They've got this home run hitter kid that they want to develop. He's going to take up essentially an extra spot at running back where they're going to, end up keeping 4, in my opinion. So they'll probably keep 5 wide receivers and 4 running backs and then a fullback. And then, the 3 tight ends. Maybe we'll get lucky and Zach Gentry will get cut, but I doubt it. They're just not that deep there. They're not that deep there at tight end. That's basically the way I see it working out. I don't see McFarland doing much in September. He's going to take some time to develop. He's going to have to learn the offense. As Ian pointed out, Tomlin and I'm sure Fickner both like those guys that have been there, done that, and that they can rely upon. And that's the way it's going to go. We're going to go with what we know to start with. And if these other guys can catch up to the moving train and, surpass their peers in terms of development, things will work out and, they will get more reps. But they're right out of the gate. They're not going to. They're just not.
Yeah, and one of the questions we had on Instagram tonight was from Zach, and he was talking about he loves James Conner, but what about a backfield ultimately of Snell and McFarland? And I think, Ben, you answered that question. It's going to take time for McFarland and all these rookies to really pick things up because the preseason training camp, if you will, is just so unusual. There just isn't that usual amount of time to absorb everything. So, maybe by October. Maybe. Look, we'd all like sooner. Don't get me wrong, but I think that's what we're looking at. Ian, put your Kevin Colbert hat on a minute here. Somebody calls you from team blah, 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 and says, hey, what do you think about Samuels? We're interested in him. Is he going to garner anything? I mean, could he get you anything on the market?
a 7th round pick, probably like a conditional 6th if he gets playing time, or I mean, I'm probably thinking a conditional 6th with playing time, but more likely a 7th. Something else, and he's probably the only one on the roster that's going to get you anything. Yeah. I mean, outside of Connor, who wouldn't fetch more than a 5th. I mean, probably lucky with a 6th, considering he's in the last year of his contract and he's got an injury history. So
any player you give up on, the currency seems to be a 6th round pick, unless you're talking about the same division. That's why they paid more for Wormley.
Yeah, true. Yeah, good point. Yeah.
One other just sort of interesting point of note here. Running backs are not a durable position at all. So last year, there was only 5 running backs that actually started all 16 games. Nick Chubb, Christian McCaffrey, Ezekiel Elliott, Aaron Jones, and Phillip Lindsay.
Yeah, how was McCaffrey one of those guys?
That's crazy.
Shocked.
Yeah.
By the way, hello, Molly. How are you this evening?
Now, I've got my daughter here too. But one note on that too, that Joe Mixon, Carlos Hyde, Sony Michel, David Montgomery, Miles Sanders, Raheem Mostert, and Ronald Jones played in all 16 games, but weren't credited with 16 starts. So, there's another 5 guys that played in all 16 games, or 6 guys, whatever it is. But still, out of 32 teams, you had 5 running backs that started every game. You need a deep backfield in today's NFL.
I'm just amazed that McCaffrey was one of them, because he's little. How can he be that durable?
Such abuse. Just takes such abuse too. Well, Ben, to that point, why can't, you and I a little bit older than Ian, so we grew up a little bit more 70s, 80s, 90s, where running backs just, had ridiculous amounts of touches every year and seemingly stayed healthy. What has happened in the last 10, 15 years that this has changed so drastically?
Players have gotten bigger, stronger, and faster, for starters.
Across the board.
The board. It isn't. It's also a question of them covering more space before they collide. Everything's spread out. The offense is more spread out as a result. The defenses are more spread out. There's more ground to cover before you can make that tackle. You're moving at a faster speed of rate because you've got an extra step or two before you hit that guy. As well, offensive line play is not great. It was better.
That's true. I agree.
Offensive line play is crap. And so guys get hit. In my opinion, guys get hit a lot closer to the line than they used to back, say, like the 80s, 70s, 80s.
Mm-hmm.
There'd be a hole and a guy would get 3 or 4 yards into the defensive backfield before there was any contact. And now, that's rare.
And a lot of that's due to the overwhelming pass heavy offenses in college.
Exactly. And it's due to poor pass blocking instruction for these guys and run blocking instruction, offensive line instruction in college now, because it's all about the spread offense and it's about holding your block for a very limited amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
So the techniques are all different and they don't do any soft work. They just, that's basically where you're not colliding fast. You're getting up against a guy and you're thinking about where to put your hands, where they're supposed to be to move him the direction you want him to go, or more importantly, not let him go the direction he wants to go. They don't do any of that in college anymore. The only guy who still does it is Kirk Ferentz. And he turned.
He what? Oh,
you there?
There you are. Okay. Yep. Gotcha.
What just
lost
happened?
You for a brief minute? I don't know. Just lost you for a minute.
Okay.
I don't know. Satellites.
So, did you hear Kirk Ferentz?
That's the last thing I heard.
Okay. So Kirk Ferentz is a guy who still turns out great blockers every year because he does that kind of detail work. where they lean guys up against each other and they go, okay, you're going to put your hands here and here. And if he tries to move this way, you counter like this. And if he tries to move this way, you counter like this. And you hold your block. But he's the only guy who teaches that kind of technique, or he's one of the few,
Very few,
who teaches that kind of technique. For the most part, college linemen are taught to hold their blocks for a very short period of time, and then the ball's gone. So that's really all they got to do. And so when they get into the NFL, they got to learn to block. They got to learn to play. I can't really say that about the guy that the guard the Steelers drafted this year. Guys, oh my God, he's a road grader. I don't know how he's going to do as a pass blocker, but as a run blocker, and he likes contact.
Yes,
you can tell. Oh,
Kevin Dotson.
Yeah, Dotson likes him some contact. Yes, and I don't expect him to do much this year either. I don't expect him to probably even see the field this year. But,
well, and that's one of the other Instagram questions that I had here from BB Sports Media asked, which Steelers rookie do you think makes the biggest impact this year? And, I think as we've both or all alluded to, that's going to be so difficult with the way things have set up for this training camp. But Ian, who's your guy? I mean, if you rubbed your crystal ball there, I mean, who's the rookie you think could have the biggest impact?
I mean, Claypool seems like the easy answer because he's probably the one that's going to score the most touchdowns. And, even if he scores 3, like I doubt McFarland scores 3 unless he gets one on a kick return or something. But I think I'm going to go with Alex Highsmith just for special teams contributions. I don't think he sees the field a whole lot on defense, but I think he'll see a lot of special teams time. And that guy likes to, speaking of liking to hit people, I mean, that guy likes to hit people. And so I'm going to go with Highsmith. One other closing thought on the running back, since, Ben had mentioned about, players get farther down the field and that things used to be a lot more packed in. I just looked up real quick, like Emmitt Smith's career, like yards per attempt, right?
Yeah.
Emmitt Smith played 15 years in the NFL. He only had 3 seasons where he averaged more than 4.5 yards per carry. Now, Le'Veon Bell, in his short time in Pittsburgh, also had 3 seasons where he averaged more than 4.5 yards per carry. So,
interesting.
Emmitt Smith's whole career was basically volume based, right? He wasn't. I mean, he got a lot of big runs. Don't get me wrong, but from a yards per carry standpoint, it was longevity and it was volume. I mean, Smith had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
It had an amazing
Smith had
offensive line.
Yeah, Smith had 7 or 8 years with more than 290, with more than 300 carries. So it was just the volume of carries that he got, and it kind of gets back to that 3 yards in a cloud of dust kind of thing. You run 3 yards, you get hit by the lineman or the inside linebackers, you fall down, but you're not taking the abuse in the open field, which I thought was a great point by Ben with the speed factor and the spread offense factor.
Yeah, and Ben, was your rookie guy is McFarland? Is that who you were alluding to?
I think Highsmith is actually a very good choice. McFarland, I think, will make a greater contribution in November and December than he does in September, right? So he's going to be one of those guys who comes on later anyway. Claypool, I think he'll have opportunities to score touchdowns. He'll be used more in the red zone than he will, in the other 60 yards of the field.
Right.
Primarily because he doesn't know the offense yet. He doesn't have the chemistry with Ben yet that you like to have between receivers and quarterbacks. But the thing he does have is a very good skill set with 50-50 balls. We talked about it when he was drafted. He's a bully.
Yeah, good point.
He's a bully. And
he is.
In the red zone, having a tall guy who's got a good skill set with 50-50 balls, you take advantage of that. It wouldn't shock me if he had 4 or 5 touchdowns this year, only had, 35 receptions.
Yeah, I can see that.
It wouldn't shock me at all, because it would just be one of these things where, they're just throwing him the ball in the red zone initially anyway. And if he gets one touchdown a month, that's 4 touchdowns. So I'm not going to be shocked if that's the case.
And he's also got a little bit of an advantage because he's got a chance to go up against some pretty good corners in practice too. Joe Hayden has been around the block a few times, and I'm thinking will probably show that rookie just about everything he's going to see from opposing DBs. Maybe I'm wrong, but I would like to think so.
And that depends on how much scrimmaging they actually do. It's like it's scout team versus the number 1 D. If that's the case, then yeah, he will get that. If he's running a lot of 7-on-7 and a lot of drills, he's not going to see the best corners given his position.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
In the pecking order right now.
You are listening to the Steel City Blitz Steelers Podcast, presented by Deck Roofing Incorporated, serving Broward County and the southern Palm Beach counties. Whether it's commercial, residential, multifamily, or condos, contact Deck Roofing today by visiting deckroofing.com. And that reminds me, Florida had a little tropical storm hurricane come through there. The only companies that ever like hurricanes are roofing companies. Their phones go off the hook as soon as the hurricane comes through. So if you ever see any cheerleading for a hurricane, it's usually by the roofers because they know they're getting paid.
I would think the plywood dealers are pretty happy about that.
Yeah, there's another
before the hurricane comes in.
Yeah, well, something we don't really have to worry about in our parts, but
nope.
Be that as it may. I wanted to address one thing here real quick that we did talk about on the last show, but, Mike Tomlin made the comment that when he addressed the team and he said, guys, in our current pandemic that we are in, if one of you fail, then all of us fail. And those words to me have gotten bigger, bolder, italicized, if you will, each and every day since then, because, and I'll go to baseball because baseball's been the best example of that. You've had the Cardinals, the Marlins, and now potentially the Indians. A couple of guys on these teams made poor choices. They failed. They went to a club. They went to a casino. They had to go to the bar to get out, whatever. And they brought COVID back. And, I don't know the pitcher's name for the Indians, but, man, he laid into his teammates, basically saying, you guys got to earn our trust back because we're all trying to do the right thing, and you just screwed it for everybody. And so I think Tomlin was absolutely on the ball here. Now, it wasn't anything revolutionary because I think a lot of coaches were saying this, but he's our coach, and so he's the one we pay the most attention to. And so, Ian, is he barking up the right tree here?
He is absolutely barking up the right tree. Actually, Chris Adamski, who writes for the Trib here in Pittsburgh, had a great tweet today that I'll just read it off. The rate of overall U.S. population that is tested positive for COVID-19 is approximately 1.5%. Since Major League Baseball started playing 3 weeks ago, judging by the positive tests that have been reported, the rate of 1,800 plus players who've been on rosters that have tested positive is also approximately 1.5%. So Major League Baseball, which some people have seen as a failure because of the outbreaks on 2 teams, potentially 3, but the overall testing rate is basically the same as the general population. Now, if you take into account the fact that 2 of the major outbreaks were because guys deviated from the plan, the Marlins guys went to the nightclub and the Cardinals guys went to a casino. Arguably, the overall Major League Baseball rate would be a lot lower if those guys hadn't done that. So I think Tomlin's message absolutely rings true that if you stick to the plan has shown that it can work. I mean, overall in baseball would be lower than the general public if those guys hadn't gone out and done selfish things. So
yep.
I think the big takeaway for me here is that if you put a plan in place, it can work as long as everyone sticks to the plan.
Yeah. Ben, I assume you're going to go in that same direction.
Right now, the positive rate in the NFL is less than 1%.
Mm-hmm.
but daily testing will continue indefinitely, basically, is what they've said. So
September 5th, I think.
Well, they're gonna roll with it for the time being, and they haven't really decided when they're going to pull it. Initially, it was September 5th. Now they're like, until we decide it's not. So it could go longer than that. But I mean, thus far things are going pretty well, and as long as guys realize that they're not just risking their own health, they're also risking the health of their teammates, their coaches, and their families. They don't do anything dumb. This could work out. Knock on wood.
Yeah,
everybody.
Yeah. Well, Tomlin gets knocked a lot for cliches and all these other things, but I think he was spot on there, and I think that was definitely worth revisiting. I want to switch over to the defensive side of the ball and talk a little bit of depth. Mark Caballi, who, of course, used to be for Trib Live for so long, now at theathletic.com. He hopefully didn't jinx us at all, but he wrote an article recently about Devin Bush and the fact that if he's injured, that defense basically is in magnificent trouble. How are they going to address the depth there, Ben? I mean, Vince saw limited snaps last year. I mean, they've got Ulysses Gilbert, who we know is a really fast player, but was hurt last year. I mean, there's not much there. What on earth are we going to do here?
Well, the NFL has finally lifted their moratorium on tryouts, so you're going to see more guys signed. I don't like a lot of the available inside linebackers personally.
Right.
I don't know what I would do. Maybe a combination of Gilbert and their draft pick Brooks. I don't know, man.
Sliding him down, yeah.
You can put Vince in there in that spot on first and second down, but if it's an obvious passing down, he's outmatched. It just isn't.
Right.
Doesn't work. The thing they do have going for them is their defensive front between the line and the edge players is very strong, very, very strong. And their defensive backfield is very strong. So I disagree that they're in a world of hurt if Bush goes down, but they are in a bad position. The nice thing about having a key guy like that you got to count on in a Devin Bush is that he's young. He's statistically anyway, he's less likely to be injured and stay out for a long period of time. He's more likely to heal quickly than would an older player. Yeah. So we got that going for us,
which is nice.
Yeah, it is nice. Yeah. But I'd like to see Gilbert, who they obviously based upon the way they've handled their offseason between the draft and their signings, they obviously have a lot of faith in him, and they see something there that we haven't seen yet, and they feel pretty comfortable with things. So, it makes me feel better bearing that in mind. We'll kind of see what happens. Certainly having long tenured defensive linemen in front of those linebackers helps, because there are little things that the line can do to make sure that blockers don't get off the line, to take on those linebackers, and that makes their life much easier.
Switching over to the secondary, which you alluded to, a lot of discussion about Minka Fitzpatrick getting moved around a lot more this year. And of course, I think that's something that we would expect. He came over once the season had already started. So you're a little limited in how much you can actually do and teach there. But some talk of Cam Sutton in that rotation back there as well. I mean, how do you envision that working with Minka moving all over? What should fans expect to see in regards to that?
Well, rumor has it that they're expanding Sutton's role this year, and that Mike Hilton is still just going to play on first and second down because they view him as a good tackler. So they're going to keep him in there. Then they're going to bring Sutton in as a dime on third down. But they're also talking about, in a 3 safety alignment, having Sutton at safety and freeing up Minka to read more and jump more.
Mm-hmm.
Minka seems to think that he can do more to bait quarterbacks, run the wrong direction on purpose, and then come back toward the ball and create turnovers.
Yeah.
Things along those lines. So I'm a little dubious yet as to what's going to take place there. I'm not a fan of Cam Sutton as a tackler. Having him in there as free safety is not exactly ideal from my perspective. Now, as a coverage player, he's fantastic.
Much improved. Yep.
He's been solid all the way along. But last year he was amazing.
Well, I say much improved because I know me anyway. I wasn't overly impressed when he came out of Tennessee.
I thought in coverage, I thought he's always been great. Good anyway. Last year he was great. He's always been good, but just his tackling just leaves a little bit to be desired. Mm-hmm. And having that be the last line of defense on your defense,
it's like Mike Mitchell.
No,
he's
Mitchell
better
can
than
hit.
Mike.
Mitchell can hit.
Hit, tackle, two different things.
Yes,
it's true.
And Mitchell had no clue where the ball was. I mean, I remember watching a play that happened right in front of my seats at Heinz Field where Mike Mitchell hit a guy, knocked the ball out, and it's laying there on the ground, and Mitchell starts celebrating and walking like towards the fans and like throwing his arms up in the air, and the other team recovered the ball.
I remember.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Gonna miss that.
Yeah, me too.
Gonna miss that a lot.
So, this rookie Brooks, I mean, we talked about the running backs and how we've got, really Snell is the only between the tackles hammer type guy. I mean, the safety position seems to be filled with guys who are kind of in the box type tacklers. What can we expect of this Brooks kid? Ian, I'll go with you first.
So there was an old Jerry Seinfeld joke where he said, if the black box is the only thing in the plane that survives the crash, why don't they build the whole plane out of the black box? Apparently, our strategy on defense for years has been, why don't we build the whole defense out of strong safeties?
Yep.
Because the one year they drafted both Terrell Edmonds and Marcus Allen, who are both in the box strong safety type players. And then they went out and signed Morgan Burnett, who is also an in the box strong safety type player, or at least better at that role. Actually, his best role was leaking stuff to the media, but we won't go there. And then, I mean, and don't get me wrong, true center fielding free safeties are incredibly hard to come by, which is why when you find a guy like Minka, like Earl Thomas, those are guys that are worth paying money for or giving up assets for, because a true center fielding free safety is really hard to come by. Those guys that can really cover sideline to sideline and can locate the ball in the air. Ryan Clark was a decent free safety. He was a good tackler. He knew where the ball was going, but he couldn't find it in the air. I mean, he missed a bunch of interceptions that he could have had throughout his career if he just knew how to look for the ball in the air.
Yeah, in fairness, though, the thing that Ryan excelled at, Ryan Clark, was covering for Troy.
Yeah, he did.
Because Troy had carte blanche to freelance and do whatever he wants. There were times I was watching Troy and he would turn his back on the play and run to where the ball was going. And a lot of times he was right. Don't get me wrong. A lot of the time he was right. But sometimes he was wrong.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there were times where Troy would line up like in the A gap next to Casey Hampton like he was blitzing, and his role was to be in a cover two, and he would get back there to play the cover two.
Yeah.
But you're right, it was that turn your back to the play and haul ass back to your cover two spot.
Yeah.
20 yards downfield. But yeah, I mean, Troy did freelance a lot. So Minka is really the only true free safety they have. There are a lot of safeties out there on the free agent market, which I know we're getting close to wrapping up here, but that is something that the NFL opened up workouts again this week. So you're going to see a plethora of players get signed.
See some movement.
Street free agents. Yeah, there's already been a couple, not by the Steelers, but just around the league. So Steelers still have a ton of cap room, but they could probably afford to sign a couple guys. So we'll see if they sign anyone. Safety depth is really short after the top guys, and Brooks, the draft pick, is another one of those, in the box free safety or strong safety type guys. That being said, considering you're starting inside linebackers, another position they don't have much depth at, are Devin Bush, good 3-down player, and Vince Williams, 1 to 2 down player, very good run defender, kind of a liability in pass coverage. They used him almost as a sub for Stephon Tuitt last year after Tuitt went out, that, they'd play Hayward as the 1 down lineman and put Williams in, but Williams was always blitzing and never had to be exposed to pass coverage. So that being said, I think the ideal is to be able to plug in a strong safety type player at inside linebacker on those, 3rd down or long 2nd down obvious passing situations. They can cover running backs out of the backfield. They can cover tight ends or could occasionally blitz. That's the long-term goal. I don't know if they'll get there, but that's the long-term goal.
It seems to be where they're headed. And of course, as players start to move around a little bit too, we'll see exactly what happens and what Kevin Colbert and company are thinking in that regard. Ben, any final thoughts before we wrap up this edition?
Yeah, I'm still at a loss and trying to figure out whether or not there will be fans at Heinz Field at all, or how limited it's going to be. And I don't know about you guys, but, when Vince Williams tweeted today, man, it's going to suck without Renegade. That, basically what he was saying is the crowd always hypes up the team.
Yep.
And he loves the fact that the crowd is there to do it. And to a certain extent, we're going to lose some home field advantage because of that.
Yeah.
It's not quite the home field advantage that the team once enjoyed at Three Rivers because it's not that loud. But
agree.
It's going to be interesting. We're going to see what happens here. I don't know. Anyway, those are my thoughts.
I'm with you. And I guess I just want football, and I'll worry about the fans and how many and all that other stuff later. But anyway, we will get on out of here for this edition and get back at you next week with all the latest from training camp and player moves, coaching decisions, all that wonderful stuff. But again, thank you to Deck Roofing of South Florida for sponsoring us. And that will do it on this edition of the Steel City Blitz Steelers Podcast. And hey, go Steelers.
Ravens suck.